Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast. Today we're taking a time machine back to 1975 to explore what life was like on the New York subway system. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast, a weekly podcast for those who believe that moments matter most and that a beautiful photo is more than just a sum of its settings. A show for those who want to do more with the gear they have to take better photos today. And now, your host, Raymond Hatfield.
Oh, welcome back to this episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. As always, I am your host, Raymond Hatfield, and I am so excited to have you here today. I hope that you have been well lately. I hope that you've been staying safe, as I know that we're still, this world that we're living in is still pretty crazy. 2020 is not one to ever revisit back if you ever do get a time machine. So, today we have an interesting episode from a photographer who shot a bunch of photos throughout New York City and the subway system for years, back in 1975 and 1985, and he recently put together a book of those images that he shot within that decade. So we have a really, really interesting conversation that I know that you are going to enjoy. But before we get on into the episode, I want to give a quick listener shout out to Paul A. 1982 for leaving the podcast a 1-star iTunes review. Yes, Paul said, quote, "Some better podcasts out there," which technically it's, Paul, that's not a complete sentence. I'm not sure if you had more to say, but accidentally hit the enter button, as unfortunately there's not even a period at the end of that. But regardless, Paul, I still appreciate you for taking the time out of your day and letting me know that just because some better podcast out there, that all other podcasts just must be trash. There's simply no other possibility. So, even with 1-star ratings, I value that feedback. Unfortunately, there was none here. There was no feedback here to learn and to grow from. So it was just a statement. I guess it was a half statement. So, Paul, feel free to shoot me an email at beginnerphotographypodcast@gmail.com to let me know how the show can improve. I would love to hear from you. And I don't want this to be confused for me being, angry about a 1-star review. I welcome 1-star reviews, honestly. Okay, look, I know that I'm not perfect. I don't claim to be perfect. But if you're out there listening right now and you're not enjoying the show, please just leave some simple feedback that can be used to make the show better. That's it. And if you're listening right now and you are, in fact, enjoying the show, I would love to hear from you and what it is that you enjoy about the show. Why do you keep coming back? Is it the diverse set of guests? Is it the honest conversations? Is it my annoying voice? Whatever it is. I would love if you would leave the show a review. Just let me know, whatever it is. Now, last week we hit 150 iTunes reviews. That's right, cue the celebration. Now let's see if this week we can get to 155. You have the power. Only you can make this happen. All right, so this week's interview is with Gerard Exupery, a photographer who documented life in the New York subways between 1975 and 1985, and actually turned his photos into a beautiful book about his experiences. And as you would imagine, as someone living in New York between 1975 and 1985, he has got some stories to tell. And we get into, quite a bit of them, actually. So I want to let you know there is some language in this episode that I did my best to edit out, as I know that many of you are still working from home, perhaps with youngins there. Like I said, though, I did do my best, and, if a word slipped, or, maybe 2 words, then please forgive me. But, what do you expect? After all, some better podcasts out there. All right, with that, let's go ahead and get on into this week's interview with Gerard Exupery. When did you know that photography was going to play an important role in your life?
Wow, good question. Big question. photography has been the only thing I've ever wanted to do from about the time I was 8 years old. Never really wanted to do anything else. And when I did, it made me profoundly sad. And yeah, I knew that this is what I was meant for.
So I know that a lot of, I don't remember when I got my first camera, the first time my parents let me play with a disposable camera or anything like that. But 8 years old is still pretty young to, I don't know, get an idea of what it is that you want to do. So what was that time like? Were you given a camera, and then what were you shooting? How did you know?
One of my earliest memories, and one of my few memories of my father, was him kneeling behind me while I'm holding his Raleigh, I think it was a Raleigh cord, I don't know. He's helping me steady it, taking a picture of the Verrazano Bridge, which was then under construction, of a ship underneath it. And he helped me take that picture. And it was the first picture I ever took. He died about a year later. And the thing about photography for me has always been about, at least at that age, trying to hold on to the past, you know, trying to hold on to him, hold on to the past. And so it's always had this kind of profound meaning for me, you know, the idea of looking at something that is already gone, you know, that, and here you have it in front of you. It's magic. It's magical. So always, there was nothing I ever wanted to do other than photography.
Oh man, that's a great story. So when you first, you know, obviously you got that camera, your dad was helping you take that first photo, so you weren't fully in charge of the camera or of the photo that you were taking.
No.
But when you did understand that there was some, you know, technicals involved in photography, was there anything that you struggled with to learn in that aspect?
Well, I'd say preteen years. I was allowed to go into New York City, and at the time, around Journal Square, Herald Square, Camera Barn, Olden Camera, all these old, which people are probably going, what the hell? You know, or just these old big camera stores. And I used to go into Camera Barn, and for $1, I could get a stack of old photography magazines, Popular Photography, Modern Photography, some European photography magazines. And I didn't have enough money to buy a camera. I had no camera at that point, but I read every single article I could possibly read. So I understood f-stop, shutter speeds, you know, correlation, depth of field, zone focusing, how to process film. All that stuff I learned before I ever got a chance to actually do it. So when I did it, it was like, oh yeah, oh, okay, I know how to do this. And so when I did get a camera, eventually, and I was allowed to start processing film in my house, convincing my mother that it was not going to blow the house up, that it was almost second nature by that point. I had a very, what's the word, big imagination? I don't know.
So when I'm always interested in this sort of aspect of it, because when I came along in photography, the first camera that I had was a digital camera. Of course, I went back to film. I understood film, but at some point I understood how photography kind of worked. But that was through a digital camera, right? I understood that I could take pictures. I understood kind of a little bit about composition and how to see that light. But when it came time to, even when I understood what an f-stop was, how shutter speed kind of reacted to a photo, I still had to put in some work to get it to all kind of come together. Did you ever have any sort of like aha moment of like, oh, like I knew what this thing was, but now that I see this photo and how I shot it, it makes sense?
I had, you know, I was like, I believe freshman high school, sophomore, when I got my first camera. And I started taking pictures for the school newspaper and local newspaper, sports and things. And I thought I was going to be having a lot more fun than I was. And I actually got very bored. And, you know, my dream was I was going to be like David Hemmings and blow up. I was going to ride around New York City, my turtleneck sweater and my Jaguar XKE, models, you know, and this was going to be great. And but here I was a schlubbing, kid in high school. And so, I stuck with the photography. Girls liked it, and my girlfriend in my senior year, her mother, I was standing in the kitchen there, and her mother said, you're the photographer, aren't you? And I go, yeah. And she goes, well, I said, yeah, sort of. And she goes, oh, I want to show you something. And she had the show catalog from Diane Arbus's 1972 Retrospective at the Metropolitan Museum. And I had never seen anything like that. It blew my mind. Wow, you can actually take pictures like that. And I knew, I thought, I have goosebumps even thinking about it now. It was just the most amazing realization. And, and even though I'd looked at all these photography magazines, a lot of them really didn't cover Arbus or, who else would I say? Dwayne Michaels, well, maybe more him. Joseph Kudelka. Another one just blew my mind. And I said, that's what I want to do. And it rekindled that idea of that photography is magic. There's something very special about being able to see and transcribe onto paper or now screens, that vision and have it be so unique.
And that you don't just have to shoot sports for the rest of your life if you don't want to.
Well, it's interesting. I worked as a photographer's assistant at fashion. Hey, I don't know. Do you remember the Ilford boxes and film that used to have a black and white woman? They were like ads that had a black and white woman like standing next to each other. Mm-mm. Oh, that's how old I am. At any rate, the guy I worked for did those shots. And, he did a lot of fashion. And within about a week, I realized that, God, I hate this. For what, I realized that the business of photography had very little to do with what I wanted to do. And that when I tried to, I had a couple of jobs shooting pictures of things. I shot a couple of ads and stuff, but, just miserable, not miserable, but just not happy. And the only time I was really happy was I was just roaming around and looking and seeing. So I forgot what the question was.
we were talking kind of about, that's fine, because the next part of the question there was, now little introduction. You have just come out with a book called Subway, right. 1975 to 1985, which is a collection of photos that you shot while you were roaming around, as you said, in your element there, in your happy spot, just of photos down in the subway. Now, I'm trying to wrap my head around now I know that he's only 7. I know that Charlie's only 7, but I'm trying to wrap my head around letting a 13 or a 14-year-old just roam around New York City on their own, and it's terrifying my Midwest mind here, I suppose. But what was it about the subway system that really captured your attention enough to really shoot it with intention?
Well, I actually started doing that when I started attending School of Visual Arts. So I was 18.
Okay. And that's a little easier. Okay. I gotcha.
But my mom, it's funny, when I was like 14 years old, I said, can I go into the city? And she goes, if you go with a friend or you go with your sister. And she was very cool about it because she grew up in Brooklyn. So, and she was one of these mothers who, there are things out there in the world that are kind of dangerous, but if you don't learn how to handle them when you're young, you will not handle them very well when you get older.
Ooh, wow.
So, she was not, DIFUS wasn't going to come in and take us away, but she was definitely a real world type of person. So, but the subway stuff, because I was riding the subway every day to go to School of Visual Arts. I was coming in from New Jersey, and Visual Arts was on 23rd Street. And so, and when I started going, it was so exciting and new. And there, it's like there was so much to see. It was overload. But riding the subway, it was kind of easy because Tri-X at 400 or 800, always f2 2.8 at a 30th or a 60th of a second. My camera was a Nikon f2 with a standard prism finder. There was no meter. So so I figured, oh, this is good. At least I'll get something I can use. And but initially, when I started to take pictures on the subway, I had real anxiety issues about it because you don't want to get punched, and you don't know how you're going to be received. So, and I was anxious and nervous, and I pretty much might take a picture, might not, go to class, go home. And then one day I'm sitting in the subway on the train, and there are these 3 women sitting across from me. It's a shot that I still have, that Monroe put as the key shot in the piece they just did about it. And I remember thinking to myself, if this is what you really want to do, you better, get a pair, grow a pair, and either do it and find out you can't do it, or do it and just do it. And so, I started pretty much covertly shooting pictures on the subway, which was not necessarily good feeling, and it didn't engender good feelings about me from the subjects, obviously. New Yorkers are very kind people. However, they don't, they'll tell you exactly what they think. And so after a while, I realized that if, look, I was a kid, 18, 19, 20, that if people didn't perceive me as a threat, here's this guy with this camera. And, I would sit down with it on the subway. And so the next thing after covertly taking the pictures was I would take the pentaprism off the top, look down into it, look at it like, oh, what's wrong with this thing? I don't know how to use this camera, And by the time I had played around like that for a while, people would stop, people just thought, eh. And then I would take my pictures. All right. And that even bothered me because not bothered me, but I thought there is a way to do this that's a little bit more honest. And basically it came, as I said, if you're not a threat, if you come across as vulnerable, and I think that's the most important thing, that you take a picture of somebody, you may ask, you may not. And if you don't, and you see that somebody's upset, there are many things that you can say to diffuse a situation, or even make it a better situation, that you can take more pictures by then talking. I used to say, oh, this is for school, you have such an interesting look, or stuff like that. And then it became, it really would depend on my mood, because sometimes I felt almost overtly like, I'm going in there and take pictures, and I don't care what anybody thinks. And when I look back at a lot of those subway pictures, I think, man, I must have been a real sometimes. But that bit about being vulnerable, about being honest with your subject, even if you're not even talking, they see you with the camera. Obviously, they know you're going to do something with the camera. And it's not, it's just not, and maybe it's only in your own head, my own head, that I'm not a threatening person, and I certainly wouldn't do anything to hurt anybody. And so me taking this picture is the most natural thing in the world. Don't you think so?
You think that that's it? Is that how you embody being vulnerable to essentially strangers? Is that if you just the way that you carry yourself, or is there something? Yes. Yeah. That's it. The way that you carry yourself.
I'm a big fan, and I felt this not because I was broke, but because I really believed that you get one camera, one lens, 4 or 5 rolls of film in your pocket, and don't come back until 9 o'clock at night, or 10 o'clock at night. And so, at that time, people weren't walking around with F2s or F3s or, Leicas. It was more of an unusual thing. So the fact that I had a camera that wasn't too obtrusive, just having the camera, it would get attention. Not hiding it, was a lot of it, like I said, they see you with a camera. Obviously, you have it for some reason. That's like my favorite question is there film in that camera? No, of course not. I always carry this camera around with no film in it whatsoever. So,
If you had to guess, how many times have you been asked that question?
more than 100.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, yeah. Not so much
I can't
anymore.
imagine.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I can't imagine somebody asking if I had a memory card in my camera.
Exactly.
Like, that would just be such a ridiculous, like, no. Of course.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, of course I am.
It's a piece of jewelry.
Yeah, wow. Well, today I feel like I've seen a lot of people who just wear cameras as jewelry.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would imagine that back in the late 70s, early 80s, that was not the case. And I try, personally, I try to think back to what it must have been like in that time when you had to have a camera, because nowadays, not only are people already distracted by their phones, but everybody has a camera on them.
Right.
And when you're in the subway, late 70s, early 80s, can you walk me through what that atmosphere was like? Was it just dead quiet? Nobody was talking? Was everybody reading the paper? Because I know that they weren't watching YouTube on their phones.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I was looking at, when I was doing the book, first of all, my old pictures really bother me to a certain extent because, those are, people can look at those and those are the first pictures that anybody ever said that they were good or nice or whatever. And, and I've done a lot of digital, and I have my camera with me every single day. And I've done a lot of pictures since then. But there's just something about that era which is evokes something in people, especially in the city. Like pictures of the East Village and during the whole punk thing. Now the entire East Village is Starbucks and God, I don't know. I mean, it's just Gap. And when I was roaming around, it was like, hey, you know what? Don't stop walking fast until you hit the subway if it's after 10 o'clock at night,
Wow. Yeah.
But it was, the difference is, like, looking at the pictures in the book of people on the subway, they are reading, they're looking at each other, they're looking at you, they're hanging on to the strap. There's a rhythm, because when the subway is moving along, that, you hear the gap in the tracks. There's a clunk, 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 and there's a rhythm to it. It always was like music to me. And now, when I look at the pictures I've taken in the subway in digital times,
everybody's just looking at their phones.
Yeah, and it's, I've always loved technology. I'm usually a first adopter of things, and I really don't believe that this technology has been the best thing for our culture. I mean, it's wonderful to have information at your fingertip, to be able to take a decent picture with it or video, but it's this, I don't know. I wonder if I would have gone ahead in photography if I had paid so much attention to that thing.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, and do you think that there's a lot of photographers, or a lot of potential photographers, I suppose, who are missing out on a lot of shots because maybe they're preoccupied?
Yeah. I don't know. I think where there's a will, there's a way. And if social documentation, street work, fine art, whatever that you want to call it, that if that's really something for you, you're going to find a way to do it. And that is not necessarily going to stop you from it. It may stop you from getting a particular shot or whatever, but it's only pictures, I mean, so
Yeah.
You'll get the next one. And I am very fortunate, I think. I'm grateful for the fact that I learned about all the analog things, because they are so applicable to the digital world. And when I have explained to people with very nice cameras in the digital age, the correlation between f-stop shutter speed, one goes up and the other goes down, that it's the same in terms of exposure, but these are things that are happening. And it's like, what? It's like with no real concept of what's going on. And I feel very fortunate. And getting back to the Fugees, f-stop shutter speed that any Fuji camera you can pick up and not read the manual and get a good picture, because f-stop shutter speeds, ISO, or and that's all you need to know to make a picture, if you know what those things are.
Yeah. So taking a photo, like knowing how to properly expose an image, and actually taking a photo that maybe is compelling or an interesting photo to look at, are, I think we can both agree, two completely different things. I can see a perfectly exposed photo of an orange, I don't know, but it not be compelling to me. But these photos that you've taken on the subway, even though some of them maybe, just because of the nature of film, wouldn't today be technically clean or great photos, just because of film in the way that it is, they're still really compelling to look at. And I always like to think of the Henri Cartier-Bresson term, which is just the decisive moment, right? Which is, for those who don't know, just capturing the height of the visual elements that happen during the flow of life.
If
right?
you don't know who he is, you should.
You should. Yeah, definitely one to look up, for sure. So can you talk about just what is that flow of life on the subway, and then some of those challenges that you faced to capture it?
If it's a challenge, I'm doing something wrong. Because I think that there's and I noticed this very early on, you're not going to see things until you've been kind of tenderized by life, until you've had the experiences of that are universal: falling in love, getting in a fist fight or something, getting arrested, or heartbreak, disappointment, being drunk, getting fired from a job. That these are the things that create in you, I believe, or at least did in me, empathy for the people I'm looking at, and for being able to see something that somebody else might not have noticed. I love photography of all sorts. There's a print in the Museum of Modern Art by George Tice, which I have stood in front of many times, and it's like falling into it. It's this gorgeous print. It's of a rest stop on the New Jersey Turnpike. But for me, it's always the people. It's always about that. And so there is a flow. When I would go out taking pictures, sometimes I just wouldn't feel it. But other times it would be like on the subway with the rhythm of the noise of the tracks and the train, that you see things almost in a rhythmic way. It's like music. And every shot may not be a wonderful image, but you think it is. And that it's almost like a feeling of well-being, that you're relating to your subject and you're getting this feedback. And for me, and I've talked to other photographers about this, the idea that it's an actual physical reaction when I see a picture, a street shot, like that one, right, of the people, two kissing.
Oh yes, I do.
Right, it's like my exposures are so crappy sometimes because I've got one opportunity to get that decisive moment, that picture. So, I'm not always perfect technically, but when I see that moment, it's a gut sensation. And it's like, I always kind of know what it's going to look like on paper. Mm-hmm. And even in the digital too, I feel the same way. I don't have to, what do they call it? Chimping. I don't have to.
Looking at the screen.
Yeah. Because although it's nice, I got to say it's quite comforting. It's either you feel it or you don't feel it. And if you don't feel it, I think it just means you haven't lived long enough. Or had enough of life's experiences.
That's something that's got to marinate for a little bit. I like that idea. I like that idea a lot. When a lot of times, because let me formulate my thought here. I think I love that idea so much because it really gives a lot of validity to the type of photos that it is that you're taking. I don't remember who said it. I always get it confused. It might have been Ansel Adams, but I believe that he said every photo has two people in it. the viewer and the photographer and the viewer. And that idea to me, I don't know if there's ever been a quote, which I should really be more acquainted with it, but I don't think that there's ever been a quote about photography that resonated with me more. And it's like you said, I mean, that just makes sense. It's those life experiences that you have that help you tell a story in your own unique way, that help you see something maybe as it's happening or right before it's happening. And this kind of goes back to the whole conversation that we had on cell phones. You know, how much are you not living by being on your cell phone?
Right.
Which, I mean, obviously, I don't want to make this. I know that cell phones have done a lot of good.
You Luddite.
And I love my cell phone, and I probably spend too much time on my cell phone. But I mean, that still is that validity. It's like so much comes from what it is that you live through. How can we do more of that? How can we do more of that?
Yeah.
Do you think that you have as much? Do you think that your life experiences, as you said, give you more of an influence on the photos that you take versus looking at photos of other acclaimed photographers?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, just going back to what, you know, that Ansel Adams quote, I always have thought, but I only really put into words in the last few years that, you know, the most important part of that photograph is you as a photographer. And what is that photograph? At least, look, I understand landscape, I understand commercial work, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about street weird stuff. You know, I'm talking about the this deeply personal relationship you're having with seeing, and yeah, it's about you. And you know, I have a kind of a hard time. I don't like feeling. I had a pretty crappy time growing up, and I've had some experiences that definitely have made me much more empathetic to my fellow human being. When I first moved to New York and was going to School of Visual Arts, I had a friend who lived on the Upper West Side and worked part-time in a camera store on 88th and Broadway, West Side Camera. And I went up to, so it was only like, I knew him for maybe 3 or 4 weeks going to school. And so he said, hey, why don't you come up later in the afternoon and let's go get some Chinese food or something. There's this restaurant in my building. So I went up and I met him at the store, and I just sat behind the counter while they were doing what they were doing. And the place got robbed. And 3 guys came in. One guy has a gun. There's a guy behind the register. I'm in the middle. My friend's over here. And it was a very thin store. And, you know, it's very tiny. And the guy says to the fellow behind the register, give me the money. And for whatever stupid reason, the kid turned off the register, put the key in his pocket, and walked in front of me, in front of my buddy, and up the back steps to what was the manager's office. You tell me if this is too graphic, what's coming up, right? And so the guy's following with the gun, and you know, I'm standing there like this, and my buddy is too. And I'm going to tell you, your bladder definitely wants to let go when you're that scared.
Oh,
right?
I can't imagine. Yeah.
I was concentrating so hard on not myself, and as Skip was his name, walks in front of me. The guy who was standing in front of me has his blade. The cops called it an 007. It was huge. Jumps over the counter. Skip starts to run up the back steps, and we heard him say something to the manager who we knew was up there, Nikki, and heard this pop, pop, and I thought, oh man, that guy shot Skip. In reality, what happened was Skip had dropped down and the manager shot the guy who was about to stab him. And then the guy came out from behind the curtains and he stumbled and he landed right on top of me. And I thought I was stabbed, and I fell to the ground, and this guy is on top of me. And you know, I'm struggling to get out from underneath him. And so it was a botched robbery. The other 2 guys leave. The guy who fell on top of me is dead. I mean, the funniest part though, was I called 911, and as soon as I hung up the phone, on Broadway in Upper Manhattan, there's island that runs up, be separating uptown and downtown sides, and used to be a lot of homeless sitting on the benches drinking or doing whatever, and all of a sudden, these two homeless guys come in. One of them's holding a gun, and I went, "Holy, we're gonna get robbed again!" And they were two undercover cops. They were there in like seconds. All right, so all of this is just to say that was my very early education to life in the big city. And I got to tell you, at that time, the Upper West Side is not what it is today. It was a little dangerous at times, and that taught me how to pay attention, because those guys had come into the store, each of them separately, over the course of the hour or so that I had been there. Mm-hmm. And and it only occurred to me after all three of them come walking in the store, and it was that kind of awareness of this hinky feeling. You should really go with what your guts are telling you, and it's directly applicable to roaming around the city, taking pictures, because I pride myself on being able to get along with just about anybody, and the way that you do that is you go, you can allow yourself to get into situations as long as you always know in the back of your head who you are, what you're doing, and how you're going to get out of there. In case, I've done things with drug dealers, not buying or anything, but taking pictures, things like that, in situations that, I wouldn't want my kids to get into.
Yeah.
Okay. But at the same time, I never felt unsafe. I never had a single bad thing ever happen to me in the city. And you might say that robbery was a bad thing. I never had a bad dream about it ever. I do probably have some PTSD from it, but it was so kind of honest and poetic justice in a way, and educational. And there have been other things, not like that, but other, somebody close dying, or it just kind of tenderizes your emotions so that you become much more aware of what's going on around you, what the people around you are doing, how they're acting. Are they happy, sad? Is this woman crying for some reason? Do I take a picture? Yeah, I won't be such a jerk if I take a picture. But I'm sorry, I started rambling.
Yeah. No. I was captivated. That was an incredible story, and I'm sorry that, one, you had to go through something like that, and two, I cannot imagine what that must have been like. But as you said, it really it's that life experience that you have that really forms your opinions as a photographer.
Yeah, very much so. At least as a street photographer, I think, and I feel actually quite fortunate to have experienced that and survived, obviously, because of what it made me aware of. And that's like power. When you have been through something and know that you can survive it, or know how to behave next time or whatever, that's knowledge. That's real power, I think.
So where do you think the information of, or the power of looking at other photographers' photos, how does that play into who you are as a photographer?
I hated looking at other people's work for the longest time. We had an assignment at School of Visual Arts. First year, last assignment, pick your favorite photographer and take pictures that look like theirs. Oh. And I thought that was an insult, and I didn't do it. All I did was submit my pictures and say, "Oh, I shot like Dwayne Michaels," and I got an A. And you know something? I thought that was just like, I never really thought my stuff was that good. I didn't show my stuff to anybody for like close to 40 years. My wife, ex-wife, lovely person, who used to always say to me, you should do something with these. And I did everything possible to avoid doing what I really wanted to do. And so I never thought they were all that good. I thought that people who said that they were either didn't know what they were talking. It was the Woody Allen thing. I don't want to, from Groucho Marx. I wouldn't want to be a member of any club that would have me as a member.
Yes.
So what the hell do you know telling me this? But, you know, and it's interesting because only in the last 6 years or so, when I discovered Flickr and just started posting things every once in a while, I have met the most incredible friends. One guy in particular, his name is Steve Fretz, F-R-E-T-Z, and his work really deserves to be looked at. He lives maybe 25 miles from me, and he was the first person who I ever talked to about photography who really thought about it as passionately as I did. You know, he said to me, you know, I think if I couldn't do it, I would just want to die. And, you know, it's kind of a strange thing to say to somebody, but I understood that completely.
Yes.
You know, it's like, you have to do it.
Yeah.
You know, I had, you know, basically no choice in the matter. And so I did not look at a lot of other people's photography as a regular thing. But Larry Burrows, Vietnam War photographer, incredible work. Jay Mizell, you know, I mean, it's not that I didn't have an appreciation for this commercial work and stuff. You know, of course, Arbus, people working in that vein. And I did pay attention, but I didn't actively go looking because I was kind of afraid of confirming, yeah, my stuff does suck. You know, and I really.
How do you mean that? How do you mean that?
Because I would look at people's work and I go, oh my God, that's incredible. And then look at my own work and think, you know, mine is nothing like that. Before I realized, hey, you know what? It really doesn't have to be like that. And why are you bothering to compare yourself to anybody else anyway? And all those other reasons they tell you in creativity classes about, you know, what's a killer of creativity, you know, oh, that's been done before, all that stuff. But, you know, I was just, I had just had a really bad attitude about
like wanting to make your mark? Would that be it?
Oh, a shrink once told me, fear of success.
Fear of success.
And, but, you know, it was only till Flickr happened that a lot of people really started reacting positively towards the pictures. And I was going through a really tough time. And I started seeing a therapist, this woman, Sarah, very young. And I mean, I really had to go because I was not having a good time. And it was interesting because after the first session or two, all we ended up talking about was photography and how much it meant to me and why I didn't do it and all these other things. And she really helped me. And being on Flickr and getting the positive results and learning how to accept the fact that, you know, this stuff it's good. It's worth doing something with. You know, I think growing up and when I was younger, you know, ego is not a good thing for the creative process. I mean, you need a little, but when it becomes such a big thing, it's not good for me. It's not good for me. And I realized that I had spent my life, you know, I had a film and video production company, and I would carry my Nikon around with me and take some pictures and all, but I was not doing what I did before or I'm doing now. And I was just so unhappy. I was just so unhappy, not really understanding why. And so for me, the whole experience of photography and relating to people, I can trace this all the way back to when I was a child, my father dying and the sense of loss and feeling that somehow, you know, that if it wasn't my fault, then maybe I deserved this or whatever, you know, and that's how I processed it. And I really don't want to seem like one of the, I don't want anybody ever to feel sorry for me. I really don't, because all this stuff has made me able to see the things I see, write the things I write, which I never wrote before until Flickr. People would ask for a description, and I would type a short paragraph, And they got longer and longer and longer. And I always wanted to write, going back many, many years, and I never did. And I don't know, it was just like either through therapy, and plus there are a lot of hormones that kick in when you get to be about 55, 56, 57, 50, you know, that, you know what, it doesn't really matter. None of this shit matters. It's like, either you do it or you don't do it. And if you're not doing it, it makes you unhappy. Well, guess what? You know, you should be doing it. So I hope you're going to edit that, because that was really out there.
No, you know, you keep saying that, but it's not. It's not. Each one of these stories is completely relevant to this whole interview. You know, when it comes to shooting things on the subway, I've always, as somebody who doesn't ride the subway, I've always seen the subway as something very chaotic, as something that is just, something's always going on, something's all over the place. And to be able to find some sort of meaning or some sort of just the way that it all works together, I suppose, I think is almost impossible. You know, you can try as much as you can, but I think at the end of the day, it's truly impossible. And I get that. No, this isn't an insult, but I get that same feeling from you. I love hearing your stories. They're kind of chaotic, but there's a lot of life experience there, and there's a lot of information that I think is enhancing your book. I think anybody who reads your book and listens to this is going to get a much deeper understanding of the words that you are trying to say in your book. And I actually had a question specifically about that right now, which was, you know, as we're talking about looking through the photos of people on the subway, you said sometimes you walk in there and you just got all this, you know, like you're going in there, I'm going to take photos no matter what happens. But then you also said, and I wrote it down, you said, you shared the story of being pushed to be more genuinely interested in your subjects. And when you were, quote, new worlds began opening up for me and
you did
my
read
it. Of course, I did.
Okay.
And that to me got me really interested, because this is a world of strangers, you know?
Yes.
So how do you open yourself up? How do you become genuinely interested in somebody who is a complete stranger, who maybe you're not talking to? And did you have a goal of taking their photo when you would see these people?
I think you have to be lonely. And I think that you have to be mindful. It's almost like purposefulness, or what, you know, like the Buddhist thing about, you know, it really, it is what it is. And by just letting things happen. And that's kind of what I mean by allowing yourself to be vulnerable. I mean, it's like, and this is a very small example, but so you're supposed to get off at this subway stop because you're meeting your girlfriend or whatever. But instead you see these people sitting there and they're so interesting that you ride the next 20 stops, you know. You need to, it comes from seeing in people something that you find interesting or attractive and wanting to own a part of it, I think.
Can you give me an example of something that you would see that you wanted to own a part of?
Oh, shoot. I don't know if I have the picture. Hang on just 1 second. Oh, damn. I have a photograph. It was done digitally of this girl pushing in front of Cooper Union, Manhattan, downtown in the Village. There is a big giant cube. It's been there for 50 years. And you can rotate it by pushing on it. And I have this shot of this girl pushing on it. And her friend is on the other side pushing it too. And they are laughing and they're just having this great time. And it was very easy for me to imagine what that must feel like, to be that old, to be having such a good time with your friend to do something as freaky as pushing this gigantic Corten steel sculpture, you know, and it, you know, or there's a shot I have of a woman on a Brooklyn street, and she's leaning up against this firebox, very old woman. And it's this whole scene, you know, it's like on a corner, and she's just in the center, not very big, not too small, but just kind of leaning because she's so tired. And I remember at the time wondering what it was like to be so tired of life, just tired. And now that I am much older, I know.
Wow, this interview has just been so full of these big ideas, I think. These ideas that you cannot fully grasp with photography. As I could look at that photo and see something entirely different.
Yes.
But as you said, you as the photographer have to put yourself in these photos and kind of decide what it is that you're shooting, right? It's you. It's ultimately you who decides that.
Oh yeah, it's about me. It's all about me, me. You know, and you know, and yeah, I'm trying to be funny, but at the same time, it's true because only I have seen that. I am showing you a two-dimensional representation of it, but only I saw it and felt it and reacted to it, and only I had the feeling, that immediate feeling that hopefully I'm conveying to you.
Yeah. Do you ever hope that somebody sees a photo the same way as you do, or does it even matter?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I've never equated photography with making money at all, at least what I do. I mean, I usually just gave my prints away. You know, I didn't care. Doing the book, and I have had people buy some prints from me, I didn't know what the hell to charge. You know, it's like, here, just have it. Yeah. And so when somebody, you know, some people are very eloquent and say, oh, I like the way the lighting is here or whatever. And in my head, I'm saying, well, I had absolutely nothing to do with this picture. I don't care what the light's doing. You know, I know if it's good or I know if it's going to be an issue later on, but it's about this person. It's about that situation. And, you know, so yeah. And I'm very happy when that happens. I'm very happy when somebody looks at that picture of that woman leaning and says, I can feel her. I can feel what she's feeling. You know, and that for me, even though it's the ego, it's very satisfying. And
yes,
I think I was very fortunate. I don't think I've been fortunate. Like I have this guardian angel. She always makes sure she makes sure I never have a really, really good time, but she also makes sure I don't get maimed. So, you know,
how kind.
So, and I've been very fortunate in my life to have had the experiences, positive and negative, and I feel so fortunate to see this thing, and then have somebody else find it as interesting or as feeling as much as I did. That's more than I deserve.
No, it's a great feeling. It's definitely a great feeling, and all of this kind of comes from, you know, being able to translate, I guess, what it is that you see in your head onto, as you said, a piece of film, piece of paper, a digital chip, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That obviously comes from experience. So
yes,
your book, you know, your book spans an entire decade of taking photos. If you had to guess, or maybe you know, how many photos did you take in the subway during that decade?
I'll tell you. I have been stuck inside for almost 2 years with a severe back issue. I was supposed to have my surgery, but because of the pandemic, it's been pushed back. And, you know, and I've been going slowly out of my mind, if it's not obvious. You know, it's just, I can only walk a certain distance. I can only stand for so long. So I've spent a lot of my time just going through the pictures. I bought like, Pysography, cone inks, you know, they're archival carbon inks, and I got archival paper. So I started doing these gorgeous prints, and okay. And but you know, my ex-sister-in-law, who she is such a wonderful person, she said, "Why don't you do a book of your pictures?" Oh, I'm going to watch TV. And so it was a couple of weeks later, I'm thinking, you know, I'm losing my mind here. And so I actually did sit down and start in Lightroom, start ordering the pictures in a collection of things that might make a good book or story. And then it was only then that I realized I had so many photographs of the subway. It was never my intention to make the subway a series. It was always my intention to photograph just about everything, you know, everywhere I go and everything I see. And if something repeatedly has me interested, I just continue doing it. And I noticed that I had all these pictures from the subway. So I also had lost for a few years about 3,000 negatives. And so I'd been going through them and saying, holy crap, look at all those subway pictures. And there are lots of pictures of other things. But I thought, So I started scanning them in, and lo and behold, I had enough to do a book. And and it's interesting because it told me how I felt about the subway. You know,
Wow.
in the intro to the book, I say, it's like the transporter on the Starship Enterprise, only slower. It's this constantly changing play, you know, where the characters go on the stage, get off the stage, the scenery is always changing, and there's always a story. It's always, for me, a picture is always about the story. It's always the story. And, you know, if you like, you know, I had a girlfriend and I, we used to just sit there and make up stories about people who were sitting across from us, you know, and sometimes they were very nice and sometimes they weren't, whatever. But it was this exercise. But in a way, that's what you're doing when you take a picture of a stranger. You know, you're imbuing them with certain qualities that you perceive.
So I'm sorry, go on, please.
No, I didn't know whether I answered your question or not.
Well, yes and no. The answer was a lot. You took a lot of photos in the subway. My next question was it's more about having this long-term project. You know? Because I'm always interested in stuff like this. I was always interested in those people who took a photo of themselves every day for like 2 years or whatever it was.
What
Those
discipline?
things are always interesting. Yeah, exactly. Those things are always interesting to me, but it's always easier for me to look back than it is to look forward.
Yeah.
But kind of where you're at with all the photos that you have, when you had decided that you're going to put together a book of subway images, how did you weed out some but include others? How did you make that decision for your book?
Well, that's actually two questions, I think. You're asking me about, well, I said it wasn't really a project that I had thought of, but it was something that I consistently did.
Yes.
Photography is the only thing I've ever consistently done in my entire life. I mean, it is the only thing I have done from the time I was about 8 years old till now that I never stopped doing, you know? So, and you know, it's like, you know, when you take a picture, whether it's good or not, you know, you know, and you feel it in your heart or your head. And if you don't, maybe that isn't what you're, you know, because you have to, you know, you have to, that's how I know. I mean, it's interesting. Like I will, for the longest time, before I became much more positive about my own work, I would look at it and, oh, that's nice. Oh, that's nice. And then after about the 20th picture, you get kind of foggy. You know, it's really hard to, oh, is this one better than that? Should I go with it? And I realized while doing the book that, hey, you know, when I got tired, I'm going to go take a nap. I'll come back to this later. Nobody's beating down the door waiting for me to finish this book. I did want to publish it on the anniversary of my mom's death, because she always said, you'll never get anywhere in photography. No, she didn't. I'm sorry. No.
I didn't know how to respond to that.
No, she was like, no, I mean, oh, it should be, I'll tell you that she was not very positive about me making it a career. Okay, I'll just leave it at that. But, you know, she was a very interesting woman, and I love her. Always, she would even tell you what a crap mom she was. And she was. But she was also a wonderful person, you know. And I think, see, when your kids get to be adults and they can say, oh, yeah, my dad was a real, but he was also a good guy, too, you know. It's like by the time your kids are 18, they know exactly who you are, right?
Yes. Of course.
Whatever. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. I need to drink a drink here.
Of course, of course. No, I just think it's always interesting to think about the whole idea of putting things together in the form of a book because, as you said, I know I've gotten to the point to where every year I make a yearbook, like a family yearbook, just taken with like cell phone photos or, photos with the Fujis or whatever that I just kind of compile. And I've had to like cap myself with the number of pages for each month because if I didn't, there would be no rhyme or reason. It would just be every single photo because I have
they're
such
all
a hard
perfect.
time. No, it's because I just have such a hard time deciding what should go in and what's not. And then if I become too critical, each month only has like 2 photos in it. You know what I mean? So when it comes to putting together this book of yours, surely not every subway photo went in there. So tell me why you chose one and why you didn't choose another.
The picture's honest. There are pictures that look great because you can say to your buddy or your friend, just move over here a little bit or do this. And I've done that, and it makes a nice picture. But there are certain pictures like the woman leaning on the firebox, these 3 women in the subway who are just, that they're having a fight about something. That there's something honest about it that I had no control over, that I was just privileged to see. Mm-hmm. And those are the ones that inevitably end up as the ones that I choose, And what you said previously about the technological frailties of shooting film. I swore, and I have a very good friend of mine, when he found out that I sold all my digital gear, and I didn't sell it because I had to sell it. I sold it because, the whole story of the Trojan horse when the Greeks, they come on shore. Well, they burn the ships because you're not going back, buddy, until this is over. Yes. This is something that, and it was, I'm sure I'll get back to your original question. Stephanie Pappas, who's the editor at Monroe Magazine, who saw my stuff, and she sent me an email, and I thought it was one of my friends pranking me, and I said, okay, I said, is this a prank, and it wasn't. But, that's a magazine that they will publish digital, but rarely, that they only want analog. And I thought, So when I'm looking at the book, I tried to slug in some of my newer subway photos that were digital. It was like getting stabbed in the eye with an ice pick, because the difference is so seeable. Other pictures, not so. I have in my book, in my personal stuff here, pictures side by side that are film and digital. And, and who really, I don't care what kind of a camera it is, story. Really, each picture stands on its own. I think a picture that's relying on the one in front of it or in back of it is not as good as the one that's going to stand on its own. And that's what I try, that's what I strive for. So with the film, it's soft, it's scratched. I swear I would never. I spent my life I must have spent 15 years in the dark. And I was, and I made it early on. That's how I made money, by printing for other people. And I swore never. All my clothes were fixer stained, whatever. And just looking at the book and seeing, the way she had explained it to me was that there is something that is more human about film. That the digital is so pure, almost surgically so. It is just so clean. And it's true. It's like I can take pictures at 1600 or 3200 ISO in digital land, and they look great. Do that in film, and you can't tell somebody's face because the grain is that size. It just obliterates it. But there's something about it that just really started me thinking, and I had to ask myself, why did I change to digital? Well, it wasn't really a conscious decision. It just happened to be the camera that I had at the time. So I decided that I'm going to re-explore that. And when I was processing the first roll of film I put through this, I'm leaning over the sink and I'm going, I felt like I was one of those actors in Williamsburg, Virginia, who's
yes.
right. It's like, oh, this is how they did it in the old days and stuff. But I felt such a connection that I hadn't felt in so long. That idea of, crap, you know what? If I shake it 3 times instead of just twice, the contrast is going to go up and whatever, and I realized that there is something that is really earthy, grounded about having that interaction with your images.
Mm-hmm.
And I still love digital photography. And as soon as I think I'm ready, I'm going to buy that X Pro 3.
Yes.
And so it's but there is something about film that is more organic, and I wouldn't say it's any closer to my heart, but it's easier to look at, I think.
Yeah.
Those pictures.
Easier to look at. It's easier to look at. It's easier to look at. That goes back to that kind of surgical precision, because oftentimes, I know that this is said, this is dumb. I was watching a documentary the other day with my son Charlie. No, I take that back. It wasn't even a documentary. I was telling you earlier about this e-learning that he's doing because he's home from school. And one of his assignments was that he had to watch a video on nature and like how trees grow or something like that. And it was talking about how in nature, there's almost never any 90-degree, there's no like straight lines. Everything is very chaotic and organic, I suppose. Right. And I don't know if, now this is getting really deep into the philosophy, I suppose, of film, but where even the same roll, just one, frame different than the next, can be a completely different image in the way that it renders the grain or even the light coming in, that it gets very exciting. It gets very exciting that you were able to capture something like this scene that was in front of you. Whereas with digital, it's, as you said, it's surgical. It's almost like, well, if you didn't do it, then it was your fault. It was your fault. Whereas with film, you look for those impurities or those imperfections.
It's like gambling.
You're excited for those. It's like gambling.
It is, because you are going on your knowledge of this particular situation, that you've made an image that is acceptable to you. And you know what? How many times did you look at that strip of in the dark and go, oh yeah, this is great. And then when you put it in the enlarge, you realize all of them are out of focus. I mean, hey, and then you realize, that crap I learned about zone focusing, I should really pay more attention. But it is like gambling, and the reward is so great. Yeah. And when you're able to go click, that's a nice thing too. It is a nice thing too, but it's not as nice as knowing that I knew my well enough that I was able to pull this off. And it may not be the best exposure in the world, but God, what that picture is.
Yeah. I told you that I shoot on Fuji as well. I had the X100, and then I got the T. I just recently got the V not too long ago. Just mainly because I wanted the tilt screen to take photos of the kids and stuff. Sure. But yesterday we went out to go on a little bike ride with the kids. We went to a local park. And normally I would bring the V, right? I would bring the X100 V because it's that instant feedback. With kids, it's so hard to make sure that you get them in focus, or, whatever it is. There can just be so many things that not that they ruin a photo, but there's so many more, what's the word I'm looking for here? It can just, what is the word that I'm looking for here? But anyway, Influence? It can just, no, it can just be all over the place, right? When you go to take photos of kids, you never know. You never know. But I decided that I was going to bring the Pentax K1000 out there because it was for that exact reason. It was for that exact reason. Because I know that if I get one good photo, there's not a better feeling in the world than getting that photo. So, Gerard, I have to thank you so much for sharing everything that you have today. I know that I've kept you much longer than we said that we were going to be chatting.
Believe me, I could keep going. There's nothing I like more than talking about this stuff that I had nobody to talk to about it for so many years. So
Well,
I love
this
it.
world of podcasts you're gonna love, and I can already think of somebody who I really want to connect you with to chat with them,
Oh,
because
super.
you're just gonna have a great conversation. Um, but again, I really want to be mindful of your time. So before I let you go, I got two more questions for you.
Yep.
One is, what advice would you have for anybody who right now is looking to do a long-term project?
Pick something that you don't like.
Pick something that you don't like. Why
Yeah.
is that?
I hate tattoos.
Hmm.
I mean, I've seen some gorgeous tattoos in Japan. You know, it's a different thing. The idea of using your body as basically a cocktail napkin to scribble on bothers me, especially on women, because I think the female form is just pretty gorgeous, as it is. The human form, men, women, whatever. And there's a tattoo shop in my town here that I used to walk past twice a day, at least. And one day I'm staring in the window and I'm going, why don't I like this? And I just wandered in. And of course I expected to be sold, somebody tried to sell me speed, methadone, and get hit in the head with a motorcycle train.
Oh, jeez.
And you know what? They were the nicest people in the world. And the owner, I got into a conversation with this guy named Ox. And I said, I'm not a big fan. I said, but can I come back and spend a couple of hours every week? And sure. And it took a while for the other tattooists to accept me being there, because they were nasty. But after about 9 months of doing this, I understood a lot better. And I learned how to tell a story, a cohesive story about this thing that I knew nothing about.
Mm-hmm.
So it's great if you can document something that you know nothing about and learn in the process. That's got to influence how you photograph it, because that wonder, that newness, it's up here, and it's hopefully it'll come out there.
Yeah, I never would have thought of that. That is a great tip. And honestly, I don't know a better way to end this interview than with that right there. So again, Gerard, I gotta say thank you again so much for coming on and sharing everything that you did. Before I let you go, can you let the listeners know where that they can find you online and find your book as well?
Gerard Exupery, one word, GerardExupery.com is my website. Link to the book is on the website. You can also go to Etsy. And the weirdest thing is that I had a friend who told me that they Googled Gerard Exupery.
Mm-hmm.
And like 3 months ago, if I did that, there was nothing about me. And now all of a sudden, there are a lot of my pictures in the book and stuff. So just go on, just Google it.
Wonderful. And of course, I'm going to have links to your website as well as the book in the show notes of this episode.
I appreciate that.
Before I let you go, I got to just let you know that looking at your book, you sent it over, looking at your book and the photos in it, it really does feel like a time machine. And in a sense that you can't get on your own today. It's like you can't go out and you can't photograph your own time machine looking forward, but you can always look back and it feels like that time machine. And it's from the small details, from the clothes, the hair, of course, the hairstyles, the lack of any cell phones like we were talking about earlier. And when I look at the people in your photographs, I just wonder about the conversations that they were having, and that draws me in so much. And you can't help but wonder, what is it that these people are talking about?
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think, where are these people today? And you making this book.
I feel that way too. I'm always going, hey, he's dead, she's dead, they're dead. Or I wonder how her life went. I wonder, yes, absolutely. I agree with you.
Yeah. It's that wonder that your book, for me, draws me in and gets me just thinking outside of my own world, which we're all in right now, stuck in our homes. It gets me out of my world that I truly appreciate and is really fun and interesting to look at. So again, I just have to publicly say thank you for sharing everything that you did. Thank you for taking those photographs, and thank you for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun.
I actually emailed Gerard a few days after I had received his book in the mail to let him know that I was looking through the photographs with our son, my son, not me and Gerard's son, my son, mine and my wife's son, Charlie, who's 7. And it's funny because when you talk to him, he almost has no concept that the world could have possibly existed before he did. And yet he was just amazed at all the photos and the quote weird hairstyles and wondered why nobody was on their phone, while they're in the subway. So it's really interesting to think about, because this is truly something that without photography, I mean, this time would be lost. The photos that we take today, they feel 100% normal. They might not feel special to us or anything because, well, we're living them. We're living in them. But in just 30 years, a third of a generation, the meaning of these photos that we capture today is just incalculable. Incalculable? Is that the word? Incalculable. Calculable? I don't know. Is that a word? I don't know. Maybe Paul A. 1982 was right. Anyway, I want to hear from you on what is your biggest takeaway from this interview with Gerard. Feel free to share it in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group, the safest place on the internet for new photographers. And Gerard, if you're listening, man, thank you so much for your honest and at times difficult conversation. It was a true joy to talk photography with you for the time that we had. I know that we had a lot of going back and forth, and I think we had to reschedule no less than a dozen times, but I'm very happy that we finally made it happen and that we got this in the can. So, well, that is it for this week. Until next week, I want you to make do. I want you to make more. I want you to do more, and I want you to make do with the gear that you got, because I promise you, it is better than you think. Stay safe.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review in iTunes. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.